Retiring 5 years earlier than planned could cost you $400,000. And that number doesn't come from one dramatic calculation. It comes from 4 separate variables that almost nobody runs at the same time. In the next 17 minutes, I'm going to walk you through every piece of this. Social Security math, yes, but also what 5 years of early portfolio withdrawals actually does to a retirement account. What healthcare truly costs before Medicare kicks in. How a sequence of returns risk changes completely depending on which year you walk out the door. And here's what most people covering this topic never say out loud. There's a specific version of this scenario where retiring at 62 is the stronger financial decision. I'm going to show you exactly when that's true, and exactly when it isn't. This is the full math. Let's run it. Let's start with what most people actually do when they're thinking through this decision. They open their Social Security statement. They see the monthly benefit at 62. They see the higher monthly number at 67. They do the break-even math, somewhere around age 77 or 78, and they land on a choice. Maybe they take the money early and enjoy it. Maybe they wait for the larger check. Either way, the calculation is done and the conversation moves on. Here's the problem. The Social Security break-even is real. It absolutely belongs in this analysis. But it is one piece of a 4-part equation. And when you only run one piece, you can end up $300,000 to $400,000 off from where you thought you'd be. Not because you did anything wrong, because nobody handed you the rest of the formula. So let me build this around a specific scenario, because abstract math slides off. Real numbers stick. Meet Michael and Susan, both 62. They've done most things right, saved consistently, stayed invested through the difficult years, built a $900,000 portfolio. They're seriously weighing whether to retire now or push 5 more years to 67. Susan's Social Security record is smaller, so for the purpose of this comparison, the central calculation runs through Michael. His full retirement benefit, the number he'd receive at 67, is $2,400 a month. If he claims at 62, that benefit is permanently reduced to $1,680 a month. A difference of $720 every single month for life. That $720 gap is the number most people are tracking, and it matters. But here's what I want you to hold on to. When I build out the complete picture, the portfolio, the healthcare, the sequence of returns exposure, the $720 monthly difference in Social Security is not even the most expensive part of this decision. Not close. There are 3 more variables in this equation. Each one adds a layer the standard break-even analysis never touches. And the one that carries the most financial weight isn't what most people would guess. Let me show you what the Social Security math actually says first, because there's a nuance in that break-even calculation that most people get wrong, and it sets up everything that comes after. The break-even analysis for Social Security is probably the most widely discussed concept in retirement planning. Take benefits early, get less per month, but more months. Wait, get more per month, but fewer months. The 2 lines cross around age 77 or 78. Live past that point, waiting was better. Die before it, early was better. Most people understand this framework. What most people don't factor in carefully enough is the actual probability that they'll clear that line. A 62-year-old American man in reasonably good health has a life expectancy today of approximately 83 years. A 62-year-old woman is closer to 86. Those are averages. And averages have a critical implication. If you're healthy and active at 62, you're more likely than not to sit on the right side of the statistical curve. For couples, the number that matters isn't just individual life expectancy. It's joint longevity, the probability that at least one of you survives to a given age. For a healthy couple, both age 62, the probability that at least one of them reaches 90 is somewhere around 50%. That changes the shape of this decision entirely. Run Michael's numbers forward. He claims at 62, $1,680 a month. He lives to 85. That's 276 months of payments. Total lifetime Social Security, roughly $463,680. Now run it the other way. He waits until 67, $2,400 a month. He lives to 85. That's 216 months. Total lifetime, $518,400. The difference in lifetime Social Security in Michael's scenario is just over $54,000 in favor of waiting. Now, $54,000 is meaningful, but it doesn't get us anywhere close to $400,000, which means the rest of the gap has to come from somewhere else. Some people try to close that gap by pointing to the investment value of early Social Security payments. If Michael takes $1,680 a month at 62 and puts it in the market, doesn't that offset the lifetime benefit difference? On paper, yes. In practice, most people who retire early need that income. It's not going into a brokerage account. It's covering the power bill and the grocery run and the trip they've been planning for 2 decades. We're not going to assume it gets reinvested because for the vast majority of real retirees in this situation, it doesn't. Which brings us to the piece that actually moves the needle the most, the portfolio. And specifically, what happens to $900,000 when withdrawals start 5 years earlier than they needed to? The math here is more counterintuitive than most people expect, and the number that comes out on the other side is the one that builds most of the gap. This is the piece I want to spend real time on, because it gets the most weight in my thinking when I work through this comparison, and it gets the least airtime almost everywhere else. When Michael and Susan retire at 62, they're not just starting a little earlier. They're adding 5 years of portfolio withdrawals to the very beginning of their retirement, right at the front, right when the portfolio is at its largest, and right when the sequence of early returns will determine, more than almost any other single variable, whether the plan holds for 30 years. Let's run the numbers. $900,000 portfolio. They need $70,000 a year to live on. Michael's early Social Security is covering $20,160 of that. The portfolio needs to fund the remaining $50,000 a year. 5 years at $50,000 is $250,000 in withdrawals before Michael reaches 67. Before the larger Social Security benefit kicks in, before any of the income that would have reduced portfolio pressure even exists. But it's not just the $250,000 that's gone. It's what that $250,000 would have grown into had it stayed invested. At a conservative 6.5% average annual return, $50,000 withdrawn in year one would have grown to roughly $93,000 over 20 years. Run that calculation across 5 years of withdrawals, each dollar pulled out earlier than needed, and the compounding drag on the portfolio over a full retirement horizon moves well past $250,000 in lost value. We're looking at something closer to $400,000 to $450,000 in reduced portfolio longevity by age 85, under reasonable market assumptions. And that's before we account for sequence of returns risk. Sequence of returns risk. That phrase gets used a lot, and I want to be specific about what it means in this context. It is the risk of encountering a significant market decline early in retirement, while you're actively withdrawing from the portfolio. The reason this is so structurally damaging is mechanical. When the market falls 30% and you still need to withdraw $50,000 a year to live on, you're selling more shares at lower prices to fund living expenses. Fewer shares survive to benefit from the eventual recovery. The math of that recovery, for someone who is still drawing down throughout, becomes genuinely brutal. Here's the critical framing for Michael and Susan specifically. If they retire at 62, they are exposed to this risk for 5 additional years on the front end. 5 more years during which a bad market sequence can do damage to the portfolio that no recovery can fully undo. If they wait until 67, they've compressed that exposure window. They've also had 5 more years for the portfolio to grow larger before withdrawals begin, which means the same market shock hits a bigger base and does proportionally less harm. This is not just math. It's risk. It's timing. It's the difference between a retirement that holds in bad conditions and one that quietly starts to fracture in year 12, when it should be holding steady. There's one more cost in this equation that almost nobody includes in their projections. For a healthy 62-year-old couple, it can easily add $60,000 to $70,000 to the gap. It's hiding in plain sight, and I'll show you exactly where. Medicare eligibility in the United States begins at age 65. Full stop. If you retire at 62, you are responsible for your own health insurance for 3 full years, and almost no one budgets for this accurately when they're running the comparison. A silver tier ACA marketplace plan for a 62-year-old couple can run anywhere from $1,400 to $2,400 a month in premiums, depending on the state, the coverage level, and their household income. If Michael and Susan are drawing from their portfolio, their reported income may be low enough to qualify for ACA subsidies, and subsidies can bring that cost down meaningfully. But here's what most people miss. Subsidies are income-based. The moment portfolio withdrawals push their reportable income above the eligibility threshold, those subsidies shrink fast. And the planning required to stay subsidy eligible while fully funding a retirement isn't simple. It requires careful coordination across tax brackets, Roth conversions, and withdrawal sequencing. That's a real optimization problem, and most people don't solve it cleanly. Conservative estimate for a healthy couple bridging the gap from 62 to 65. $18,000 to $24,000 a year in healthcare premiums. Over 3 years, that's $54,000 to $72,000 out of the portfolio, on top of everything else we've already counted. Let's tally what we have so far. Lifetime Social Security gap, $54,000 in favor of waiting in Michael's scenario. Additional portfolio withdrawals over 5 years, $250,000 in direct withdrawals, with compounding drag extending the real impact toward $400,000 or more over a full retirement horizon. Healthcare costs before Medicare, roughly $60,000 for the couple. We're well past $300,000 in quantifiable cost before we've modeled the full compounding impact. Add that in, And the gap between retiring at 62 versus 67 in total lifetime portfolio outcome crosses $400,000 for a typical healthy couple with a mid-sized portfolio. That's where the number comes from. Not one dramatic line item. 4 variables working quietly together over 20 to 25 years. And here's where I have to be honest with you. Because the math to this point might seem to make an overwhelming case for working until 67. It doesn't, not always, not even in most circumstances for certain people. There are specific, well-defined scenarios where retiring at 62 is the financially stronger decision, and ignoring them would mean I've done the one thing I said I wouldn't. I'd be handing you half the equation and calling it complete. Let me show you exactly when 62 wins, because the circumstances are real, they're identifiable, and if they describe your situation, the framework I've just walked you through looks completely different. The case for retiring at 62 is not purely emotional. There are 3 specific circumstances where it is the mathematically stronger choice, and 2 of them apply more often than most people assume. The first is health. This is the obvious one, and it gets underweighted every time. If you have a serious health condition at 62, a family history that makes meaningful longevity genuinely uncertain, or any combination of factors that puts your realistic life expectancy below 77, the Social Security break-even never gets crossed. The additional portfolio withdrawals are offset by a compressed drawdown horizon. The healthcare gap matters less when the total retirement window is shorter. In this scenario, retiring early, claiming early, and spending the early years fully, not cautiously, is the mathematically correct decision. And the people I most want to hear this are the ones who keep working out of obligation, not desire, when the financial and medical picture is already telling them something different. The second circumstance is one that financial analysis almost never captures: the real cost of staying. There is meaningful research, including work by labor economists and retirement health researchers who have studied the relationship between late career work demands and long-term health outcomes, showing that the toll of grinding through your 60s in a high-stress, physically demanding, or emotionally depleting job is real and measurable. It shows up in blood pressure, sleep, immune function, and over the long run, longevity, which means, for some people, working 5 more years to secure a larger retirement may itself shorten the retirement they're working to protect. I want to be careful here. For plenty of people, work at 62 provides structure, purpose, and connection that genuinely contributes to well-being. If your work is meaningful and sustainable, this consideration carries less weight. But if you are in something that is slowly wearing you down, and you have the financial foundation to stop, the purely mathematical case for staying may not hold up when you account for everything it's actually costing you. The third circumstance is the one I find most strategically compelling, because it allows you to retire at 62 and still capture most of the lifetime income advantage of waiting until 67. It's called the bridge strategy. It's one of the most underused tools in retirement planning, and it changes the entire shape of this decision, which is exactly why I want to walk through it carefully. Here's what I genuinely love about this concept. It dissolves the core assumption buried in the 62 versus 67 debate, the assumption that retiring and claiming Social Security are the same decision, made at the same time. They're not. And recognizing that changes everything. The bridge strategy works like this. You retire at 62. You do not claim Social Security. Instead, you use portfolio withdrawals to cover your full living expenses. You do this for 5 years, or however many years you need to bridge the gap. Then, at 67, you claim the full $2,400 a month benefit. And the annual income the portfolio has been carrying gets substantially replaced by Social Security for the rest of your life. For Michael and Susan, during the bridge years, the portfolio is covering roughly $70,000 a year. All of it, since no Social Security is coming in. That's a higher withdrawal rate than they'd want long term. But here's what happens at 67. Michael claims his $2,400 a month benefit, $28,800 a year. The portfolio's required annual withdrawal drops from $70,000 to roughly $41,000, a reduction of nearly $29,000 a year, every year for as long as Michael lives. The longer Michael lives, the more powerful that reduction becomes. If he reaches 85, that $29,000 annual reduction in portfolio withdrawals, compounding over 18 years, represents something north of $500,000 in preserved portfolio value. That is not a small number. And unlike equity returns, that income reduction is guaranteed, inflation adjusted, and not subject to sequence of returns risk. Social Security delayed is Social Security that cannot be undone by a bad market. The trade-off is real. The early years of the bridge require a higher withdrawal rate, which means accepting sequence of returns exposure on the front end. This is why the strategy works best when the portfolio is sized to absorb those early years without creating existential risk to the plan. A reasonable threshold, If you have at least 10 to 12 times your annual spending needs in your portfolio at 62, the bridge strategy is worth modeling seriously. Below that threshold, the elevated early withdrawals can create more risk than the delayed benefit ultimately resolves. Keep in mind, this isn't a theoretical approach. It's the strategy that retirement income researchers, including Wade Pfau and Michael Kitches, have consistently identified as one of the more efficient ways to optimize lifetime income for healthy retirees with adequate portfolios. The math supports it. The longevity mechanics support it. And crucially, it respects the fact that for many people, stopping work at 62 is a legitimate goal, not a financial mistake to be avoided. Retire when you want to. Claim when the math says to. Use the bridge to connect the two. That is a genuinely different way to approach this decision. So now you have 3 complete scenarios in front of you. The full cost of retiring at 62 and claiming early, the circumstances where 62 is genuinely the right call, and a strategy that makes early retirement and delayed Social Security work together. What you need now is a framework for knowing which scenario is yours. Let's build it. Here's what I actually care about when I think about this question. I want someone to go into this decision with the full picture, their specific numbers in their specific situation, and make a choice they can actually stand behind. 3 questions. Work through them in order. Step number 1. What is your realistic life expectancy? I know that question is uncomfortable to sit with. Run it anyway. The Social Security Administration publishes actuarial tables that give you life expectancy by current age and gender. The Society of Actuaries and the Stanford Center on Longevity both offer online calculators that incorporate health behaviors and family history for more personalized estimates. If you're honest, data-grounded life expectancy is below 77. The case for early Social Security is genuine, and the gap analysis I've walked you through looks meaningfully different. If it's 82 or above, and for a healthy, active 62-year-old, that is the statistically likely scenario, waiting carries serious weight that the standard break-even discussion doesn't fully capture. Step number 2, what does your portfolio actually support? Take your investable assets and model 2 specific scenarios, not in your head, in an actual planning tool or with a real advisor. Scenario 1, retire at 62, claim Social Security early, draw the portfolio down to cover the gap. Scenario 2, retire at 62 or 65, execute the bridge strategy, claim at 67. In both scenarios, look at portfolio survival probability out to age 90 or 95, not the median outcome, the worst case decile. The question isn't, will this work if things go fine? It's, will this hold if the first 5 years are bad? A plan that survives average conditions but fractures in a poor sequence scenario is not a plan. It's a bet. Step number 3, what is the honest cost of continuing to work? This is the question that lives outside the spreadsheet. And it's the one most financial analyses quietly skip. What are 5 more years in your current situation actually costing you? In health, in stress, in time with the people you love, in a version of life you keep postponing? I'm not suggesting you let the emotional weight of that question override the math. I'm suggesting that the math is incomplete if it doesn't account for that cost in some form. Keep in mind, the research on retirement regret is remarkably consistent. Work reviewed by retirement researcher David Blanchett and others in the field finds that the most common regret among retirees is not financial loss. It is time, specifically years spent working when the financial foundation was already solid enough to stop. For some people, working 62 to 67 is genuinely the right call. The portfolio grows, the Social Security benefit locks in at its higher level, the plan becomes structurally more robust. For others, those 5 years are 5 years of a life that didn't have to wait. And the data on how people actually move through retirement is worth sitting with. Energy, mobility, and health are meaningfully different at 63 than they are at 73. The years from 62 to 70 look different from the years from 72 to 80 in ways that no financial model captures. The go-go years of early retirement, when you can do the things you spent decades planning for, are not unlimited. Run the 3 steps. Get real numbers in front of you, and then make the decision with your eyes fully open. Here's what I keep coming back to when I think about all of this. Most people who are genuinely wrestling with the 62 versus 67 question are not missing a calculation. They've probably run some version of the math, maybe more than once. What they're actually looking for is something the math can't give them directly. Permission. Permission to trust what they've built. Permission to believe that the decades of responsible decisions were enough. Permission to stop deferring a life they've been careful and intentional about building for 30 or 40 years. The math matters. Do the full math. All 4 variables, not just the Social Security piece, but the portfolio, the healthcare, the sequence risk, the bridge strategy if it applies. get it right, because the decisions made in this window are genuinely hard to reverse. But here's what I want to leave you with. For most healthy, financially prepared people at 62, the math supports more than they think it does. The $400,000 gap is real, and it is manageable with the right structure in place. The bridge strategy works when the portfolio is sized for it. Social Security delay, done intentionally, turns a monthly income difference into a lifetime income base with no market risk attached. And a retirement built on a clear understanding of all four variables, not on a rule of thumb, not on a number that feels comfortable, is a fundamentally more resilient thing. You worked for this. You stayed consistent when it would have been easy not to. The decision in front of you deserves the same care. Do the full math. Make the decision you can look back on at 80 and genuinely feel good about. That's what all of this is for. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing.